Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today we're going to get into Revelation. Derek just showed up today, and it was supposed to be Dr. Amon, but he is not here, and Derek's joining because Derek has a lot to say on Revelation. You were going back and forth with some people on your page. What is Revelation? Who is it about? Is it about Rome? Is it about something else? Let's get into it.
Yeah. I guess we need to go head first, right? There's no appetizers here. We're done playing games. So if you were wondering if we were going to do foreplay, I hope you brought the lube, because we're not. We're just going to dive in, right? I'm trying to be like Dr. Amon a little bit. Maybe I'm not quite as intense, right? Because he really gets into cavity searches and stuff. But hey, you gotta tip your hat to him when he does that. The book of Revelation, right? Apocalyptic. The idea of apocalypse is the unveiling. It's exposing or revealing the secret. And it is very cryptic. It writes in a cryptic manner. This author is not wanting, it seems, writing cryptically for the sake of the audience, probably, and maybe even the author themselves in some of the ways that they write. Let him who has wisdom calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. Well, the beast is a man. And most academics have fell on their swords when it comes to this one and just pointed out, obviously, that this 666 in gematria, as we call it, alphanumeric sequence in Hebrew, Greek, we even see it in Latin. The earliest manuscripts we have, the earliest datable manuscripts we have 616, right? 616. There are early church fathers who bring it up and say 666. It's really code for Nero Caesar.
Right. There's no, and this happens, and the reason why we know this for sure, like this is slam dunk, case closed, because it works both ways. When you're doing the Hebrew or the Greek, it's either 666 or 616. The odds of that happening for another person, or can it be someone else? That's someone else that you're thinking about, has to be able to be like Nero and fit both languages with the gematria of 666. It's not possible.
I'm not gonna say it's not possible. You can work your ass off and try, but when we're actually factoring in multiple layers to this cake, you realize what the cake is. And the setting, most academics, I think Irenaeus is one of the earliest church fathers who says, look, this is written in the time of Domitian's persecution. And there is a mention in First Clement about Domitian's persecution. And it's documented in and outside of Christian literature about Nero and what he did to Christians. Now, how severe, how extensive was some of these persecutions? The Myth of Persecution, I recommend check out, which is by Candidamas. But at the end of the day, something's going on where Nero and Christians, there's some antagonism. And so what I've concluded in my search on the book of Revelation is, here's a Jew. He's a Christ-following Jew who is writing to 7 churches in Asia Minor. He's saying, hey, God has got some message for you. Here it is. He unveils it in cryptic language, in allegory and symbolism, and he's showing all this imagery, which is very Hebraic. It's actually one of the most Jewish, if you want to use Jewish as like really Hebraic in its form. It's very Jewish in its writing. And in fact, it's
the apocalyptic genre that we get from Daniel. And it comes out of that Hellenized Judaism time period where you have Jewish Sibyllists, these pseudepigraphal texts that are very, very strange and apocalyptic, and a lot of allegories and a lot of visions.
Right.
That's it. That's what it is.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to know if these are real visions or if this is just elaborate writings about a vision, which isn't really a vision.
Yeah.
The guy is obviously traumatized about what happened in 70 AD. And
exactly. That's where it's all coming to.
Yeah.
He's trying to explain what the hell happened.
Yeah, and there's academics who want to die on the 70 Hill date and say this is written before 70, up to the climax. Usually they come from a believing flavor. They want this to be vindicated. You know what I mean?
Just don't see it. I don't see how you can get Revelation without talking about the Jewish war.
Well, you can't. Yeah, the Jewish war is inevitable, right? So and we were talking before about how we're counting these kings. We're going to get into that too. I just want to do the groundwork. It's written according to most scholars in 96 under Domitian's persecution, whatever form that actually materialized. And here is a Jew who is apocalyptic in thinking. He's traumatized from the war in 70, just like the author of 4th Ezra, just like 2nd Baruch. These are also paper or books written around the same time the book of Revelation is being written. And this is saying, damn it, God, how long are you going to sit back and allow what just happened to my people in the Jerusalem temple? What is happening right now by the beast itself, right? Which is actually controlled by the great dragon, which is Revelation 12, which this dragon goes back into primordial times. This dragon, as this author sees it, equates it to the Genesis 3 serpent in the garden.
Who bites the heel of the woman.
Right.
And we have a woman giving birth who's about to get devoured.
Right. And there's two forms of these kind of Jewish authors in the New Testament. You have the kind that's in Luke Acts, which wants to accommodate Rome, which wants to make the Christians innocent. In fact, the Romans themselves over and over saw Paul was innocent. Peter was innocent. These guys were innocent. Who were guilty? The Jews. But in this book, you see this constant blaming, even by those who were in the city, Sodom, which was called Gomorrah, called Egypt in Revelation 11, where their Lord was crucified. That's Jerusalem. So you have these Jews who are taking the mark of the beast. They are cooperating with the beast, which is controlled by the dragon, which is Rome.
Yeah.
And this guy this is a political text. This is a text that's saying, stop messing with Rome.
And I just want to get this out the way too. You have multiple sources. I'm reading them right now. Virgil, Horace, Cicero, and I even pulled up one, Juvenal. The reference to 7 hills as Rome is so common at this time in the first period, the first century. Anyone reading this in the first century, 7 hills, Rome. There's no question. Like, you're not even thinking about it. It's just, like the 13 original colonies, USA, or the 50 states, America. Like, it's the same kind of concept. There's no question about what this 7 hills is.
There's one scholar who tries to argue two
always one scholar, yeah.
Well, yeah, so this is a serious scholar. Margaret
Barker.
I
know. I'm just joking.
Margaret Barker tries to say this is about Jerusalem. And she finds
Actually, I don't think that's that bad idea, though.
I think it is. I'm going to say it is.
I don't agree with it.
Right,
I don't think it's founded off nothing.
I think it gets destroyed in the context of Revelation 17 itself.
Absolutely.
Because this 7-hilled city that is controlled by the whore of Babylon, that is guilty of drinking the blood of the saints and all that, is where every nation, tribe, kindred, every nation, tribe, kindred, you get it. The whole peoples, peoples are ruled by this kingdom. And who doesn't rule that? Jerusalem. Jerusalem does not rule anybody. Rome does. And we find a lot of Roman imperial cult stuff being jabbed at in this book as well. So,
to be fair to her, though, Rome, according to people in Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls community, was promised to rule the world. I'm sorry, Jerusalem. The Jews were promised. This was a promise from God that they will take over Rome and rule the world one day. And there will be. So there was the idea of that they will do it. It just never happened.
Yeah, that never happened. So it's really grasping at straws to pretend that this is a future thing, because the context acts like this is a current event where trading is happening. And in Revelation 18, it gives you like this list of items in which the whore of Babylon is trading in. And we know Rome empirically was trading in these artifacts and these wood and all of the things that are described in this particular context. So the only place she goes to is 1 Enoch. She wants to say Enochian literature has far more significance here when it comes to the book of Revelation. And then she quotes another rabbi. I'd almost pull it up. Eleazar 71, I think it was, if my memory is correct. Long story short, I've asked Cattell Bertholo. I've asked many of the scholars that I work with. They say what happened is rabbinic writings, which are later, are actually riffing off of Roman literature.
Sure.
So they're mimicking
Sibylline text.
Right. They're mimicking the Roman. So in order, the Sibylline, it started as pagan literature. Then it became Jewish people accommodated the pagan literature. Then the Christians accommodate the Jewish. So it's like this big list of my daddy's bigger and tougher than your daddy, and they just copy each other, you know.
And they're all using the Platonist model for cosmology and theology. Basically, they're all like sort of drawing from that to make everything make sense. That's what it comes down to.
It is, and the big bad bully of the block really is where most of these ideas come from. So Jerusalem later in rabbinic writings gets mentioned like one reference as the seven-hilled city, and it's way later. So Jerusalem just does not fit the context for this. It's Rome. And why would Nero be the beast? I mean, if Rome is not this this issue, why is Nero being mentioned at all? It would make no sense. Jerusalem would make no sense as this.
Speaking of the Sibylline oracles, just want to show people this because there was a legend, and I talked about this with Robin Faith Walsh. There was a legend that was going around about Nero resurrecting. The Sibylline oracles actually relates this, and the language they use looks really similar. Can you read that, or is that too small?
I can read it.
Okay. Look at this for a second. An unseen, unholy king. You know, you see the commentary on the bottom in reference to Nero. Mm-hmm. But if you look at 555, look at the language. From there came a heavenly plains, a man blessed with a scepter in his hand, which God gave him. He ruled all things. Doesn't that not sound like Revelation 12 language?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, this is how they wrote.
Yeah.
It's in the vein. Whoever the author of Revelation is, John Dominic Crossan wrote his book, Render Unto Caesar. I want to paint a good picture. If people haven't read that book, oh my gosh, you're missing out. I swear you're missing out. Because the front cover, it's called Render Unto Caesar. Get the political context in your mind, right? This is powerful. Here's Jesus being debated by Jewish authorities, and they go, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? And he says, hand me one of those coins, right? It's debated what the coin was. On the front, he has the Greek version of the coin because that would have been the common language, not the Latin version. That would have had Tiberius on the front that would have said, Kaiser, or God worship Caesar. So it would have had Theos Sebastos Kaiser. And on the coin, it says to worship Caesar. Yeah. Literally, like Caesar is worthy of your worship.
He's God, yeah.
And he says, see whose image is on this coin? Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, but render unto God that which is God's. And by those words, he separates God and Caesar in his response, saying Caesar's not God, buddy, which is a whisper of treason, as John Dominic Crossan said. But if you take that context, that political context, that you have emperors who are legitimately claiming to be the incarnation of Apollo, the incarnation of other deities, and are asking to be worshipped and are imposing that through their coinage as propaganda through the Jewish world as well, then you got a reaction coming from Jewish people who are saying, hey, no. We worship God. You can give Caesar what's his, but they're not God. Yeah. And in the book of Revelation, Roman imperial cult language is being used in Revelation 12 when it comes to this dragon and the scenario that's happening here. Because, first of all, I'm going with the scholarship of Adela Collins here on her on her writing of the book of Revelation when it's talking about this primordial beast and the dragon and the war literature that's going on there. But in Greek literature, Greek mythology, Leto, the mother of Apollos and Artemis, there's this idea that the dragon chases this heavenly woman. This is kind of a rewrite in a way, giving a messianic message rather than it being like the Greeks identically. But in that, at the end there, you see Leto during her pregnancy had been threatened of death by Python, a mighty snake-formed dragon, to prevent her from giving birth to her divine twins, Apollo, just 4 days after his birth traveled to Delphi, where Python used to live, and killed the dragon out of revenge. This is how Apollo got his Chthonian, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation here.
Chthonian.
Oh, hold on, someone's here.
Sorry. Yeah, it would be Chthonian, like referring to underworld or like earth deities.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I just now noticed Aaron Adair. What's up, my brother?
Hello. I'm hoping the internet holds out. It's at least more stable here in the Philly airport than Twitter is right now.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, you're in a busy place, man.
I'm actually I'm literally flying to SBL right now to talk about Dragon Lady.
That's so. Did you you've read Adela on this?
Oh yeah. She's a significant part of the research I had to do to make this, though I do push against the Leto connection, but maybe I'll say that for another time. I don't know. Let's see.
Why don't we start with you then, since you are in transition? You might have to leave more sooner than anyone else. Why don't we start with you, Aaron? What do you think about Revelation 12? Who's the woman? Who's the dragon? Tell us what you think.
Sure. Fortunately, my flight was delayed, so I don't have to run away in the next 5 minutes. But my biggest worry is this is airport Wi-Fi, and also all the airport background. So tell me if the audio's crap.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
This is definitely not my normal studio.
It's pretty bad, but it's okay. We can deal with it.
Okay. All right. So the paper I'm going to be presenting is less to try to figure out who the woman is, but more to figure out how she chose her attire. Because it talks about her being clothed to the sun, wearing a crown of stars, standing on the moon.
I think it's a clear reference to the Queen of Heaven right there, Arania. It says in our note. If you look at the Greek, not the English, the word is in Aranos, a woman clothed with Helios and Selena, with the Stephanos crown, Stephanos Astarion Didache, 12-star crown. So she's a queen, and she's in Arania, heaven, Queen of Heaven. I'm just looking at what the Greek says. But let me hear. What do you think? Do you think that's kind of because the reason why I say that, the Queen of Heaven in the Sibylline Platonist sense basically is giving birth to the nation. Like if you go to Aristobulus of Alexandria, he writes in his odes. I think it's called the Odes. No, it's not called the Odes. What is it called? Forgot what it's called. It's in his writings. It's in this pseudepigrapha text that I have right behind me, and he basically takes the Orpheus secret password from going down to Hades and how to get to your eternal life, but he Judaizes it and says that the Jews are the children of heaven and earth. So I'm wondering if the author of Revelation is sort of playing off that, saying this woman is giving birth to the chosen Messiah, the chosen people, the people who are in Christ. Does that make sense?
Well, I definitely think that she is a heavenly woman. There are very few earthly women that stand on the moon. I've checked that the number of women standing on the moon is a very, very small number, even in fiction. But the fact that the description of who she's supposed to be given birth to, that there's this quote from Psalm 2 verse 9 about him being given a scepter, and then immediately he's ascends to heaven to sit next to God in his throne. It's basically screaming this is Jesus being either given birth to, or I would actually argue rebirth to, that this might be the resurrection ascension story more than birth, because otherwise they've skipped the whole life of Jesus just to get to that point. That's a little bit weird, but nonetheless, the fact that she also comes down and she has all of her children on earth, and those children are described as people who follow the law and are followers of Jesus. This basically sounds like the mother of all Christians.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I have a hard time saying this is Mary, because she's giving birth to a child, but she already has seed. It talks about that the dragon left her alone to go fight after her seed, who are the ones who follow the law and believe in Jesus. Her seed. I thought she was a virgin. She's just giving birth now. She already has seed out there. I think this is just like a reference to maybe Israel in a Platonic sense, like a heavenly Queen of Heaven is Israel, basically the bride. That's why you get later on the New Jerusalem is the bride, right? Is that too hard to understand? Maybe that's just what I think.
I don't think it's too hard to understand. I would only push back that she's probably not the entirety of Israel, because she is selective to specifically Jews who follow Christ. So this is a much smaller subset than all Jews. So this, I think, makes her a little bit more limited. Whether that means she represents
but it does say people who follow the law and are in Christ. says both.
Right, and that's the limitation. It has to be both conditions, not one or the other.
Sure. Okay. All right. I see what you're saying.
So, if I can just say, I think we all agree, no matter where you're getting this information or however you want to interpret this, it is a rewrite of some model of something that is in the playbook. John Dominic Crossan has convinced me that this author is aware of the Sibylline oracles and is running off with this whole Nero redivivus myth, that Nero didn't really die, or that he didn't die, he escaped, or he did die, but he's coming back. Either way, the myth works. Parthians really loved this in the East, who were enemies of Rome, but they also were at some points worshipers of kings. They worshipped kings, which Alexander the Great, for example, when he went through the areas in Egypt and whatnot, he was a worshipped during his life kind of guy. And like this motif, this is where I was following with Adela, and I thought, maybe not, I don't know, but the connection was really interesting, whether you take it as Leto in this particular context, or you could take it as some other Greek mythology. It's a rewrite of that in a messianic sense to apply to their own mythology.
Well, you know what's interesting about what you just said, though? Alexander, Augustus, and Apollo, all of them born from a serpent. So the Christians are looking at the pagans as like sons of Satan, basically. They might be looking at all these serpent births as like, these are antichrist, these are evil, wicked sons of hell, basically, not sons of
minor
heaven.
Correction, though, Apollo isn't born of a serpent. In fact, he kills the serpent that tries to go after his mother.
That's right.
Either way, you can see how like the snake in this is like, and they got a hard on for snakes being bad in Jewish lore, at least in this particular context. And what really made me think is I was listening to a presentation by her. She mentioned Virgil's Eclogue 4 and how even early church fathers such as Augustine, Lactantius, Constantine, and others saw Virgil as such a pious pagan. In various degrees, they reinterpreted the poem to be about the birth of Jesus Christ. And if early church pagan, fathers are kind of doing this, I wonder, and this may not be too much of a stretch, but in Virgil, the way he interprets this Leto story and sees this dragon, this python, mighty snake form thing going after the woman who's trying to give birth, if they're rewriting this mythology, giving it to their Messiah, to their messianic Christ as their rewrite of the mythology, just like they're kind of rewriting the Nero redivivus thing using Sibylline oracle mythology as well. Like they're riffing into the same vein is all I'm saying. So it could be. I also would go just a step further to mention one more thing, and I'll shut up on this, is that the Roman cult of emperor worship, she brings this up as well, pointing out the Parthians and people all over the empire worshipped these emperors. And I was actually looking to see which emperors were claiming to be Apollo incarnate, or at least descendants of Apollo, and how this might be significant with the Leto mythology. And there's a whole page. I'm not going to read it all, but there's a lot on this where many of the emperors and the imperial cult did this. This is why I think this is a political propaganda fighting against the emperors in some way, shape, or form. They're the bad guys, but our Jewish mythology is good, and our Messiah is going to come in, and our God and the 144,000, yada, yada, they're going to kick their ass. And
right. Nero is definitely one of those. Nero's definitely one of those Apollo worshiper guys, right?
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off, Aaron. I figure why not at least like draw the conclusion and everybody can kind of see you've got emperor, imperial cult worship.
I think we all agree that this is very anti-Rome, first of all. This isn't like Rome is the seven hills, Rome is the dragon, Rome is the enemy, Rome is Satan, basically. I think we're good on that, right?
I won't say Rome is Satan. Rome isn't Satan. This is the clever part.
Okay.
Rome is the beast, or at least the kings that are the beast, and the dragon is the power over the beast. So the dragon is the Satan.
Sure.
He controls the beast, or at least he is the one ultimately behind the powers that be. So that's how I interpret Revelation 12. And I looked at that and I thought, hold on. So yes, in a sense, you could just say Satan equals Rome, because who controls it? The dragon. And I would say that dragon is, by the seer we call John of Patmos, I think he interprets that as the Genesis 3 dragon, because we see it in Revelation 21 and it's pretty freaking clear, which is very odd. I wonder if like late Second Temple Jews are really starting to do this weird stuff like Enoch and this in this apocalyptic text. Like, Jews never did this before. Then all of a sudden they started going, that serpent, man, he was a bad guy. It makes me wonder if there were some Jews who realized Yahweh was bad.
Yeah.
And like, hold on, we got to defend Yahweh as good because he's not the liar. It has to be the serpent. I don't know. I'm throwing out stuff to see what sticks, but something's going on.
Well, is everyone good on that part? Because I want to get into 17 a little bit too, if we could. But let's. Anyone else?
I was just going to comment on Genesis 3 because I was actually going to bring that up real quick. Where is it? 3:16. Because it directly parallels this. You have tell me if it's up.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. Let's see. And
just
God,
read the English. Just read the English.
And God. Well, it takes no time. And God said to the snake, because you did this, this crafty thing, or because you're, I'll just read the English. Yahweh, God said to the snake, because you have done this, cursed be you from all the animals and from all the wildlife of the field. On your belly shall you walk, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life. So here he's being brought low to the ground, but we associate that as, oh, well, he doesn't have legs to walk on like upright anymore. But I think it's more likely that he loses his wings, because that fits the whole like the idea of the seraph brought low, the chosen, like,
that's interesting.
Servant of God. And not only that, but you have that where basically the dragon becomes the serpent, becomes the dragon again, because here it says, let's see, the Ava, literally hatred, it translates as enmity, but hatred I will put between you and between the woman, and between her seed and between your seed. Let's see, they will bruise you on the head and you will bruise them in the heel. And that also kind of goes along with the like constellation, how you have like the what was it, the woman and the dragon like right by each other.
Yeah.
But then here,
ready to devour her child as well. Like it's ready for.
Oh, this is interesting because it says, to the woman, he said, this is God saying, I will multiply your pain from your pregnancy. With pains shall you bear children. And then here we also get the association, towards your husband will be your lust. And so in this, like, you have this context of lust being associated with a woman who's also being attacked by the dragon.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
I go with Ronald Hindle on the original context, I think, of the Genesis situation. The way I interpret it is, I think this is a literal snake in its original context, but because it's so ambiguous and it leaves so much room, no wonder rabbis had plenty to commentate on and debate over for over a millennia, that it gets reinterpreted and molded to whatever type of preference later debate may be, whether it be late Second Temple Judaism, of course, post-war Judaism, whatever it might be, they find ways to kind of do it. But I mean, the way that Ronald explained it is they really had a fear of snakes in this part of the world. And another thing is the snake literally steals immortality in Gilgamesh epics. So like, you got to blame the serpent, which is why they stole their life. They don't have eternal life. They get kicked out of the garden. I take that to be a literal serpent, but I see why endless imagination can explain the criteria.
Yeah, the myth is definitely trying to explain why snakes are these weird creatures that don't have legs. It's one of those not etymological, but I'm reading the technical term for a myth trying to explain things in nature. That's definitely a part of it.
It's ideological. I think you're right.
Ideological. Thank you. I had the wrong E word in my head. At least I didn't say the F word.
Now, I'm going to ask you guys something. Is this the end of? Is this the last thing we hear of this woman who's the crowned with the 12 stars. Because I've heard a couple people recently point out to me. One of them is Dr. Ramon. And I'm not sure I'm sold on this, but I want to throw it out there because this is really interesting. When we get to chapter 17, there's another woman, and she's the great harlot, and she's basically, she has the cup of porneia that all the nations drink from her, abominations, and she is standing with the beast.
You have that reference up?
You want me to pull that up? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I want to mention something catchy that I noticed the other day.
All right, let's get to it.
Revelation 17, right?
Revelation 17. Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up right now. Boom, 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 boom. And then, am I still sharing my screen or no? I'm not, am I? Okay. Here it is.
I don't see it. Hold on. No.
There it is. Okay, there. 17. Boom. Did you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So you got 17. You have the 7 bowls. The kings of the earth were immoral with her, and those who dwell on the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her immorality. And the angel carried me away into the spirit into a wilderness where I saw a woman sitting. Now, this is where he thinks she's also in the wilderness. And it says in the Revelation 12 that she'll be nourished for 3.5 years. That's 1,260 days or whatever. And basically what Amon was saying is after the time is over, she's no longer crowned as the queen of heaven. Now she's the queen of the underworld, basically, and she's become what's the word that you call defiled. So this was a woman who gave birth to all the righteous, basically the Jews and the Christians, but now she's completely defiled, representing Israel being defiled, and now God's going to allow her to be taken over by the Romans. What do you guys think about that?
Oh, so do you think this is actually referring to Jerusalem then?
That's what people are getting at.
Yeah,
Jerusalem.
I'm not convinced that this is
Jerusalem. I'm not saying
Jerusalem.
I'm convinced about that either, but I'm throwing it out there to hear if you guys can rebuttal that, or what do you guys think about that?
So you go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, I would think the first thing to note, and it's just barely on the screen here, is that it says this woman is getting drunk on the blood of the saints and the witnesses of Jesus. Again, if this is the same woman, this is the person she gave birth to. So it'd be a weird thing that she's now literally eating her children drinking their blood. That is at least not.
Jesus is killed. Jesus is killed by the Jews, and I know he's killed by the Romans, but they blame the Jews for it. You know what I'm saying? Like.
But again, if she's supposed to be, this is supposed to be the woman who gave birth to Christians. She is supposed to be the heavenly mother of all Christians, and now she's also their murderer. That seems inconsistent.
Another thing, just to add to that, all right, in this particular context, it talks about her being guilty of the blood of God's holy people here, or the saints.
Yes.
And those who bore witness to the testimony of Jesus. There's different commentators who want to argue that maybe these are Jews, and then some are just Christ-following Jews. Like there might be two categories here. Yeah. Ultimately, the Greek word's different than what we see in Matthew 23 and Matthew 24, where there is this accusation to the Jews in Jerusalem: you are guilty of all the blood from righteous Abel to Zechariah. But it actually says prophets. So in this case, the woman is guilty of the saints of Christ, or at least maybe if you want to say two categories, it sounds like 70 AD here. And
don't forget, who killed James? It was the Sanhedrin, right? Those are the Jews. Like you might be able to, if you're going to make that argument, you might say the author of Revelation is looking back at all these martyrs who were killed by their own people.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the term is prophets in the Gospels. Yeah. Here, it is specifically Christ followers. These are people who follow Christ. So you have to make the stretch and say, oh, these are synonymous and they're identical people.
I get what you're saying.
There's a lot of stuff like what Aaron noticed, little things. When you add up those and calculate them all, you start to realize, hold on, something's up here. And even the idea in the same chapter, this woman rules all nations, tribes, kindreds, and tongues. Jerusalem does not rule shit, honestly. The only thing Jerusalem rules is
in 17. In 17, she does rule. Is that what it says? She does rule everything.
17. I'll get you the text here.
That's pretty important too.
Yeah, she
also noted that she says she's wearing scarlet, for example. She's wearing the color of emperors of Caesars. That's true. Pretty important as well.
That's a very good point. Okay, while you're pulling that up, Derek, I'm going to show one more thing.
Verse 18, last verse. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth.
Gotcha.
Jerusalem didn't roll over nothing, man. Rome rules over everybody.
So that's a really good refuter to that. I'm glad you brought that up. But before we even end on that, I just want to show some. This is also part of that argument. Just want to throw it out there. Just want to give it a little bit of more last breath on this argument. But I think I agree with what you're saying. Yeah. And it's from Ezekiel. It's not just Ezekiel. All over the prophets, there's this reference to Jerusalem being a harlot. Mm-hmm. And then this one really portrays it. Really trusted in your own beauty, played the harlot because of your fame, poured out your harlotry on everyone passing by who would have it. Moreover, you took your sons and your daughters who you bore to me, and those you sacrificed them to be devoured. You even have a similar language being said here about Jerusalem. But I think you made a good point even before I brought that up, is this woman in 17 is a ruler. That's a really hard hurdle to get over if you're going to argue this woman is Jerusalem. But the last thing I want to ask you guys, how if we already have Rome being represented by this beast, why is Rome being represented again by a woman? Does anyone have an answer for that?
I think I might have something that ties this all together. If you could just go back to where it talks about, was it that she's drunk on the blood of her children or whatever? Yeah. I think you could probably look at that. And there's also a way you can view this as being both Rome and Jerusalem, but being more metaphorical. So in the case of it being Jerusalem, it's I think it's probably relating this concept of the mother of Israel, who is being called a harlot, but at the same time, there's also this idea that so the word for for a capital city is Ema. It's derived from the same word as mother, M or Im. And so there's this idea that mother and city that they're connected. And with that, I think you could maybe argue that because there's already this idea that, that lands or, kingdoms are represented as feminine. So you could view it as she is the land of Israel or the land of Judah, specifically the land of the city of Jerusalem that has become drunk on the blood of her children who have been martyred. So it's not saying that she has killed her children, but that she's drunk on it because she is the land. But beyond that, it's something that someone else said was that, you have 7 hills in Jerusalem and in Rome. But another thing that's really
it was only Rome. Only Rome, actually. It was later Jewish authors that copied the Roman literature that started to try and equivocate that. But that's late. That's well after this literature is written.
Okay, yeah, that's not even something that I'm really resting my point on. But
so you're basically saying Herodian Israel would be this, it's still Rome, but it's trying to pretend to be Israel. Maybe is that what you're saying, Ariel?
Well,
you said Israel and Rome. Was I hearing you? Are you saying Roman occupied Israel? Is that what you're saying?
Well, so yeah, that's probably what it's referring to. Like when the early Christians were being slaughtered, especially during, Jews and Christians during the, destruction of the temple, that it might be talking about this, how, the land has become, drunk on the blood of her children.
Because it's still Rome, but it's Eastern Rome is what you're getting at.
And not only that, but if you look at, because it talks about the mother of Israel, later it gets referenced as, the mother of Israel, it's the land or the.
That actually does kind of fit though. Aaron, I saw you kind of go, what do you think about that? Because if the 7 hills is literally Rome, we're talking Rome, the geographical Rome, why is it too much of a stretch to say that the eastern side of Rome is being represented by something else, a woman, a harlot?
Well, it seems like the woman is associated with Rome because if she is lying on the 7 hills, that would put her in the Roman area. But I do want to agree that Ariel is right about the female representation of cities because, for example, the modern term metropolis comes from the Greek mater in polis, literally mother city. And you find very commonly on coins that a woman represents them. I remember looking at a lot of different coins specifically for Antioch, and on the reverse, they have the woman Tuke, the goddess of luck, but is often a city goddess as well. She's usually wearing a crown of the city walls, things like that.
Well,
so that's an extremely common thing.
Athena and Minerva are the protectors of the city. The city's always we got to save our city. She needs us. It's always a woman,
Well, I'll just give you my 2 cents. I mean, Jezebel's a well-known, famous queen of Babylon. Okay, So we read in the book of Revelation, particularly, this is a Babylon. And one of the quick, simple little logical jumps that I see this as Rome is Jerusalem didn't destroy Jerusalem. It was Rome that destroyed Jerusalem. Sure. Babylon destroyed the first temple. Rome destroyed the second temple. So Rome is just Babylon all over again.
Yeah, Peter even says this in his, or whoever wrote
if
Peter.
You want to decipher Jerusalem, walk with me real quick. Revelation 11. I'll tell you who Jerusalem is. Pull it up and show it on the screen. Right. So we know who Jerusalem is. I don't think we should get confused here. And it's really simple to see who they are. They play a role in this book. Revelation chapter 11. Pop that up for me.
All right, you see it?
Two witnesses?
Okay.
Yep. So scroll down.
Okay.
Slowly. Okay. 2 witnesses have finished their testimony. The beast, blah, blah, blah. The bodies will lie in the street of the great city, figuratively called Sodom and Egypt. Now, figuratively, we know this is Babylon is this great city in Revelation 17. Here you have this great city, verse 8, the street of the great city, figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was also crucified. We know Jesus wasn't crucified in Rome. He was crucified in Jerusalem.
Right.
And it goes to describe this. Jerusalem is code for Sodom and Egypt. Rome is code for Babylon. Once you see the code, it's easy to kind of decipher this situation and realize, like, all right, hold on. Why would I say, oh, I need Jerusalem to also be Sodom. I need it to also be Egypt. Oh, and I also need it to be Babylon. And I also need, like, there's just so many playing parts that I think we got clear reference to where the Lord was crucified according to this. And I would say this is a reference to Jerusalem because this is also where 70 AD takes place. And you see the dead slain in the streets. But this is highly symbolic because you have these two prophet figures. Some debate who they are. I like to think Elijah and Enoch, people who never died. You could say maybe Moses or whatnot, that are these two witnesses that come down. The law and the prophets might be the witnesses here, symbolically speaking. And they die, but they come back. And, Tim LaHaye, rocks this one out with his Left Behind series. And we all know how that one ended.
Yeah. I want to hold that thought for a second. That was important. That was interesting. I want to get into the 3.5 weeks, the 7-year thing. I want to ask you guys about that for a second, but there's a quick super chat from Nemo History. Hope I said that right. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate that. You guys help me keep this thing going by these super chats. It's really important, and I appreciate every single one of them. Thank you for that. Have you related the historical context to McHugh's older astrotheological interpretations, above and below? Anybody want to answer that?
I'm thinking this might relate to Bruce Molina wrote this large commentary on Revelation, and basically saying the entire thing is based on the positions of the stars and the constellations, and literally everything, including the number 666, is actually in reference to constellations.
I think that's going too far.
I remember I think so too. I think actually the way it even started was too far. I have strong disagreements with it.
Then we're actually going into territory that's like we're becoming theists now, because we're saying that the stars are actually predicting real events, which I don't know if we're going to go there.
Well, I don't think at least that's not what Molina was arguing, was that basically arguing that everything in Revelation isn't about really what's going on Earth. That's really not the point, that it was all about the star stories. And yeah, I find that to be unpersuasive, and a lot of his arguments are very hard to believe.
Doesn't that divorce it of its political significance? Because it's so politically...
I agree.
I mean, it's got the 7 this and the 7 that, and anyone who's like curious to know the formatting of Revelation, Adela Collins, she really gives you an analysis to show you how it's broken up, and it seems to be repeating in a different visionary sense. The same stories are repeating in different chapters. Like, you kind of have to know this chapter connects to that, almost like a chiasm in a weird way. But like I think we figured out who Jerusalem is here. And I think we figured out who Revelation is, who the Babylon is, being Rome. And I think the problem is, tell me if you're following where I'm going with this. The problem is connecting this, telling Jews, do not take the mark of the beast. What is this beast? Neron, Kaiser, the Roman Empire. Don't don't accommodate yourself. Getting back to the whole story about Jesus, whether this is historical or not, that ain't the discussion. The point is, what is on that coin? Render unto Caesar that which is. Separate yourself from what is on that coin there, and notice that guy's not God. We have a God. That's not God. There it is. Theos Sebastos Kaiser. And that is Tiberius right there, Caesar on the coin. He thinks that would have been one of the coins, especially floating around in the 30s, that would have been handed or at least debated amongst Jews in this topic. So I just want to emphasize another interesting point about this whore of Babylon in Revelation. I think it's 17 or 18. It goes on, 18 goes on, same woman. It says that she does sorcery. Like she's tricked the people. She's enticed them. Notice it's always sexual language.
Right.
She's this like, oh, everybody's drawn to her. I don't know about you, but I don't read in history that Rome and all the nations of the earth are like sexually drawn to Jerusalem. They're just not like, oh, wow. It's just not a thing that I noticed. That might be something throughout time.
I have to give you a nice little classical connection to this as well. I only read this literally today in one of the commentaries on Revelation. If you take the word for Rome in Latin, flip it backwards, amor, the word for love.
Ooh, nice. That's
and this is a pun that was apparently well known by other Latin poets. So the fact that she's also a harlot and she's supposed to represent Rome, it's almost too good to be true. Come on, there's a purpose here.
Well, I mean, if we go back to my source that I brought up from Juvenal, I mean, look, he describes the 7 hills. You'll always have friends in the trade. They'll come flocking from near and far by ship. Let me get rid of. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. I don't mean to get rid of you, but thank you for that. I appreciate that. It says they'll stick coming flocking from near and far by ship or by coach. These gentry who scratch their it's basically getting at people are coming from all over the world to see Rome. Yeah. They love Rome.
I mean, you could try to argue, but here we go again with like anything goes. You can make up any interpretation you want if you try hard enough.
Yeah.
Well, what happens once a year? Everybody goes to the Passover, right? And even non-Jews will participate in the court of the Gentiles in Jerusalem. You can make up anything you want. But to pretend that this is not a seduction to the entire world and that Rome is not like enticing everyone to participate in their system, this guy sounds like an extremely messianic, but he is absolutely against this system that is there. And Jews are accommodating it. Jews are participating in this system of Rome. They are collaborating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So personally, the way that let's take.
Yeah, you can finish your thought.
Yeah. So I think that part of it is like we want to view it within these like clear cut, categories as like, oh, this is this and this is this. But I think it also might be part of it that the writers of this text are trying to center Jerusalem as the center of the world, regardless of whether it is or not. But I think the thing that connects Rome and Jerusalem and all these other parts of the Roman Empire is actually the worship of Cybele, or the Heavenly Mother, that probably that maybe the writer of the text is correlating back to this, Mother of Jerusalem, Mother of Israel, that was worshipped as the Queen of Heaven, and that was later seen as heretical. But I think on top of this, it's important to remember that the harlot, or the mother of Rome, as much as you could say there was one, especially at that time, would have been Cybele, especially within the context of like porneia and harlotry.
And Cybele was a foreign god that was imported to Rome from the east, from that part of the world. So it's possible that there might be, I'm just trying to add to what you're saying.
Hey, I'm blocking this douchebag in the chat, dude.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. By the way, since we're coming back to the woman, I probably wanted to say a couple things about her again, since she's going to be really important. But I think you had a super chat up that we failed to answer.
Yeah, I did. I just lost it for a second, but because Derek was.
I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Graham Pong, thoughts on Ed Casey's glandular interpretation? I haven't read that. Does anyone know about this?
It sounds like, well, we have 33, particular things in our chakras, and like there's 7 levels within our consciousness, and like it sounds like you've
heard this before?
No, but the glandular, like your glands, I suspect.
I have no idea.
I wouldn't be shocked. And Edgar Casey's one of the sleeping prophets who go ahead. You probably know more about him,
Aaron probably knows
than I do.
Yeah, I've only read a tiny bit of his stuff, but yeah, the so-called sleeping prophet from the early 20th century, and just like most people who are prophets, they say vague things, and people afterwards connect it to everything else. But he also had a bunch of Bible interpretation stuff. I only read a little bit of his stuff relating to the birth stories of Jesus, because that's kind of my thing for studying. There wasn't too much there that was interesting, except his whole focus on, magicians came to see baby Jesus. But how he talked about Revelation, I haven't read anything there directly. All I know is the book Revelation is pretty psychedelic as it is, and having a prophet from the 20th century also talk about it, it's probably, psychotics on top of psychotics.
Well, that's interesting. Graham Pong, send me some information on that. We'll check it out, definitely. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it.
One comment on this, and I don't think that Jerusalem doesn't play a role, but in Revelation 17, there's an article by Peter Oakes, and I don't know if it's behind a paywall or not. I absolutely recommend. He's been emailing me back since I emailed him last week, because I've been on this Revelation thing lately, and he emailed me back and I said, I want to do a show with you. This guy really dug deep, and he even shows Sibylline oracles to show the seven-hilled city is Rome. So anyone who's approaching this chapter and is not at least factoring that in, whatever you want to do after that, go for it. But Rome is this woman who also comes up out of the water, right? Like, Jews are not fans of coming out of the sea, okay? They're usually not the seafaring type. Who were those pesky Philistines? Those damn Greeks, the Phoenicians. Well, what are they doing?
The fleets of the Shittim.
Rome, and they're all sea creature types. They come out of the water, but the land animal, the land is the Jewish people. They would not be the guys. As far as I'm concerned, the context seems to be evidence that these would be a better context for that. But she entices them with her magic, her sorcery. And Peter Oakes connects the Greek here and says, notice something in the Gospels. And this isn't a direct correlation. Like, it doesn't have to be copying. It's in the milieu of the New Testament literature. You remember the pigs, the demons that get cast out into the pigs? It literally is almost like a magical spell. The way Peter Oakes describes this is the pigs get cast into the water. And what was the name of the spirits, the evil spirits? Legion.
Right.
Rome.
Okay? Yeah.
Rome. So the spirit is Rome. Okay. This is the thing. Like, if we don't get that, man, we're going to be stuck thinking it's the Jews' fault. In fact, the New Testament does this enough already. The Jews did it. It's the Jews' fault. They're this one sons of Satan. This, that. And anti-Semitism literally just thrives out of this literature. So it's important we also recognize Rome's fault here. And he wants to talk encrypted for this reason, because them and those seven churches in Asia would be done if they were outrightly speaking against the emperors and such.
That's a good point.
Just really quick, I think it's also worth mentioning that Rome was also heavily associated with the pig for a number of reasons, including because they ate it. But I watched this really interesting video about the reason why pigs weren't seen as unclean in Europe was because they had forests to go around in, whereas in the Middle East, they basically got isolated into eating scraps and stuff. And so because of that, they got seen as unclean. Also because they had to wallow in their own filth. But the thing that I thought was worth mentioning is that this association of the sea, that Asherah or Atirat is actually called the lady who walks on the sea. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up, there was another thing that so with Magdala, because we're talking about this whole concept of like the whoredom or whatever, that Magdala is actually referred to in the Talmud as Magdala of the Dyers, and that it was believed to be like cursed or that there was something that happened to it because of whoredom. And it's possible this whoredom is actually whoredom after another god, like other than Yahweh.
Yeah.
But
idolatry.
And the last thing I wanted to bring up was in regards to what Graham said. I'm actually here. I'm streaming it right now. So this is from, I think, either 17th or 18th century. So, this is much later, but this is like a tradition that's being kind of pulled out of the Torah that I think might have something to do with what he was talking about. So this is from Kedushat Levi on Genesis, and basically is about the Garden of Eden. So a river comes out of Eden to irrigate the garden. Performance of the commandments is perceived as irrigating the brain cranium that consists of 4 cavities, one of them being a cavity divided into 2 parts. This stream channels this inspiration directly from God and branches out into 4 rivers, each channeling inspiration to the 4 lobes of the brain that fill the cavities. So, and here it says each branch feeds the appropriate lobe according to its function. The word Eden describes the region from which ta'anug, pleasurable experience, emanates. And so there it's relating the Garden of Eden to pleasure, because Eden means pleasure. But and one last thing, sorry, because I just want to bring this up before I forgot. So this is from Hosea 2. Let's see. Rebuke your mother, rebuke her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. And let her put away her harlotry from her face, and let her adultery from between her breasts. Else I will strip her naked and leave her as on the day she was born. And I will make her like a wilderness, render her like a desert land, and let her die of thirst.
Wow. Harlot's blood right there, for they are now a harlot's blood.
And in this context, this is speaking of northern kingdom Israel that has been conquered by Assyria. But here's the interesting thing. This is what I get into. I love this stuff because you then get to see the creativity of the author within the New Testament. Because what typically happens when interpretations happen, and we aren't factoring in the context, the time, when it's written, why, all of that, what ends up happening is people go to the Hebrew Bible where they see a reference or similar language, and it may actually be invoking that. And then they say, well, what's the context mean there? Therefore, that's what the context means here.
Right.
And every academic that I talk to says,
it could be a polemic. It could be
They're
a polemic.
reinterpreting. And Peter Oakes talks about the language because he was actually wrestling with this whole, is it Jerusalem or Rome thing? And he goes, without a doubt, seven-hilled city, Rome. Like that is a point for Rome no matter what. But then he noticed some of this language where you could see, hold on, look at the prophets. Mostly John the seer is quoting from the prophets, mostly when he
now you see why I brought this argument up, though.
Yes, this is why I recommend that article, because he goes and shows you, hold on, anytime you see a reference, in these cases, it's Jerusalem. But the great city, right? We see this term for the great city. We find that for Nineveh. Go read Jonah. You find the great city for Babylon. There are other places, Assyria, like there are major cities that are these great cities. But in Nineveh's case, right, God wants to show mercy and, he doesn't want to destroy them. Go and preach repentance to them. What also is happening historically here in the Hebrew Bible, you see antagonism. There's like different ideas that float around about goy. Like how's the author view of the nations at the time? Depending on what literature you read, Ezra and Nehemiah, they're very like stick to your own kind, particular about our seed being holy. Don't go to these foreign wives that are going to make you chase false gods and all that kind of stuff, even though they're fun. Okay, let me stop. But then there's pro, kind of like the book of Isaiah that has this, like the nations will flow in. We've got an optimistic outlook. By the time you get into the first century, like Gentiles sin too. And what I'm trying to get at in that case is you could say Nineveh sinned, but like, it's explicit that they have changed philosophically. Their understanding of sin isn't just like the Hebrew Bible describes it. It now has become a philosophical concept where like everyone has fallen and everyone needs salvation. It's not just a Jewish thing. And this is starting to happen. And then Paul's using Roman language of adoption, which find that, show me where that's clearly spelled out. The closest you can get is God says, today I've begotten you, right? Israel. But Paul uses a Roman language and then combines it with this Jewish thought and is talking about non-Jews becoming children of Abraham. Galatians 3. Dude, you're not a genealogical son of Abraham. How are you a child of Abraham? Adoption. And by the pneuma of Christ. That's radically new. So if we don't take like the newer ideas and then apply them, we might misinterpret when he references something from the prophets. It's so complex too. Like you really got to get deep into it.
Yeah, that's a good
Sorry,
point.
I know you see a super chat.
No, you're fine. You're fine. That was a good point. Thank you, Charlie Golden, for the super chat. I appreciate that one. Just dropped in. Not sure if you guys went over to the Nero revival conspiracy, which we did touch on. Do we think the writer of Revelation was talking about the Nero impersonator in Parthia during the reign of Domitian? What do you guys think?
It could be. There was like at least guaranteed
there was a few of them. Yeah.
Two guaranteed.
The last one. He's talking about the last one, And the first, okay, I'm reading it right now. This is just from Wikipedia, so this is what it says. 20 years after Nero's death, during the reign of Domitian, there was a third pretender supported by the Parthians who could hardly be persuaded to give him up. The matter almost came to a war. That's from the Perseus Project source. But yeah,
if I can just say one, and I'll shut up because I've been hogging the time here, but I think this is an interesting point. We all can agree on this. The fact that really, historically, people were pretending to be Nero tells you how serious the lore, how serious this was to people for like 400 or 500 years after Eusebius. If people are literally so scared that Nero's coming back, that impersonators are now acting this way and Rome is on the edge of their seat, that should tell us something about it. I mean, today, I don't know what an equivalent, like what we could equate to give significance to this, but it was so important that like there was literal nations about to go to war because they thought Nero's coming back. This is about to lead us into battle.
Yeah.
That's how far this went. And we just don't get it. We're not there. We don't understand it. We weren't in the context.
Well, this super chat brings us to the next topic that's going to be big right here. I want to hear you guys. Revelation 17 talks about 5 kings that have fallen, 7 total, 1 is to come. It says, this calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains of which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast that was, this is what the super chat was getting at, that I think he's talking about.
Yep.
And now is not, is an 8th king who belongs to the other 7 and is going to destruction. So a lot of people point out that they're talking about, if they're talking about he was, that was and is not is an 8th king. So basically saying, going back to one of the previous kings, the 5th one, which would be Nero. How do I get that number? I'm going to throw out my theory. If you guys want to push back on it, whatever you want to do, but let me just throw this out there. This is what I think the 7 kings is. First of all, you can't start with Julius Caesar. You got to start with Augustus. If you start with Julius Caesar, it gets all this. It's such a gray area because when Caesar is killed, then you have the conspirators controlling Rome. You have Sextus Pompey as the king of Sicily. You have Mark Antony being called emperor. It's even in Josephus. He calls himself the emperor. It's the waters are too muddy. For Caesar to be the first king, you can't do it. The real first king is Augustus. So you got to start there. Then you get Augustus, number 1, Tiberius, number 2, Caligula, number 3, Claudius, number 4, which brings us to Nero, number 5, who's the one who fell last, right? But a lot of people are going to point out there's 3 more emperors between him and Vespasian, and which brings us, because if Domitian's the 8th king, how do you get to, that doesn't make any sense. You still have Galba, you still have Otho and Vitellius. Well, if you look at Suetonius actually points out that those 3 emperors were considered rebels. A lot of people didn't even during the Flavian era didn't even recognize them as real Caesars. It was just during the war period. In fact, there's even a map that illustrates that there was parts of Germany who did not accept Galba. There's parts of Dalmatia and Moesia that did not accept Otho. Parts of Syria and Egypt did not accept Vitellius. They were all claiming Vespasian was the emperor right away, right off the rip, Vespasian. Other places said, no, Otho. So there was a bunch of conflict happening between the year of the 4 emperors. So what I think the number 5 is, or the number 6, you jump from Nero straight to Vespasian, who's number 6. Mm-hmm. The 7th being his son Titus, which gives us Domitian number 8, which lines up perfectly now, because now you have Domitian as basically the 2nd Nero. What do you guys think about that?
One quick thing, that in the text it said that 5 were killed, not the 5th was killed. 5 have fallen. And I think we can add that up well, because if you take the 3 pretenders that Vespasian finally put out, that's 3 dead there, and then 2 more dead. You have Caligula being killed by the Praetorian guards, and then Nero offing himself. That gives you 5 right there. And once you get to Domitian, those are the only 5 emperors who had a nasty end.
Oh, so you're okay. Wait, hold on. Let me get you, because I had Nero at 5. I don't know if you noticed that. But
I did. But just the text says, it's not says the fifth has fallen. It says 5 have fallen. Like a total of 5 have fallen.
Right.
Now that's interpreting fallen to mean like they died in some horrific way instead of just saying they are no more.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't think it has to be.
I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong, but
but you know what? I forgot to mention this is big. It tells us two things: when this was written, and when the author wants you to think it was written. The author wants you to think this is written right after Nero died. He's predicting that the next one will come, and then 2 more are to come. No. He wrote this after. This is like how Daniel is played out. Daniel wants you to think this is written in the 400s, but we know it's written in the 200s.
No,
or
600s. But yeah. You
get my point.
Yeah.
Now the same thing's happening here. This author is clearly writing back after Domitian, maybe during Domitian, maybe right after Domitian, right around the 90s, mid to late 90s. So he's predicting after Nero, the 6th will be, he's basically trying to show you he's a prophet. He's predicting. But I think this tells you right here when it was written and when the author wants you to think it's written. But I definitely think this author is not accepting the year of the 4 emperors, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, as real emperors or real kings. He's just cutting to the chase straight from Nero to Vespasian, which, by the way, the Talmud does that too. The Talmud talks about Vespasian being told that Caesar is dead. Now he's the new emperor, which matches up with this map right here.
Yeah, it's a whole new family from Claudian on. It's not the same family line.
Different. Yeah, exactly. So I think that works.
I mean, I like your interpretation. I don't know how far after this. I mean, how far we'd want to go with the details, but taking Nero Redivivus, I definitely am on par with that as well. And I still haven't wrapped my head around completely how this author thinks this Nero myth is supposed to play out on their part. Are they thinking the Parthians are going to join them against the Romans? Because if you take down in chapter 17 here, it says that 10 kings come. The woman, which is Rome, he's predicting Rome's destruction in this very chapter by saying that the 10 kings will come and they will eat her flesh. It says right here in verse 16, and the 10 horns and the beast that you saw will hate the prostitute. They will leave her desolate and naked and will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by uniting to give her their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Jerusalem didn't rule over the kings of the earth. And this is a failed prediction that the way Peter Oakes interpreted it was these are client kings. He thinks that client kings fit the 10 kings that go against.
I was just going to say, if you look at the map of Parthia, okay, Parthia is split up by satraps. There's about 10 of them. If you like, it's not like you can't. I'm not saying it's exactly, but the author could have thought there was 10 of them. When you look at, you got Persis as a satrap. Hold on, I gotta make this bigger so I can read it. Elymaius, Carex, Adiabeni, Etrotony, Harkinia, Babylon is his own, Edessa, Albany, Iberia. You get about 10 right there, right? So the author, and I'm not just making this up, I've got this from people interpreting, that these 10 kings are Parthian satraps that are pro Nero, basically, and basically like siding with the beast. Is what I'm getting. Mm-hmm. Also, one more thing I wanted to point out. Whoops, how do you get rid of that? One more thing I wanted to point out is the last thing I want to point out about this, the kings thing, because it says right here, where did I just lose it? Okay, the kings, 5 have fallen, right? So Nero's the 5th. 1 is, so the author's trying to put himself in the time of, I think, Vespasian. 1, the other has not yet come, but when he does come, he must only remain for a little while. Well, Titus only reigned for 2 years. Then the 8th king comes, who was part of the 7 going to destruction, which would be Domitian. It fits perfectly, like a glove. I'm just throwing that out there, right?
I mean, yeah,
I'm saying I think the secret is when you cut out Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, who are seen, according to Suetonius, as rebels. Even though he does list them in his 12 Caesars, but he specifically calls those 3 rebels. Then I think the author of Revelation seeing it like that.
I mean, it could be. This is the problem with highly symbolic literature and we're not the like audience, right? But doing our damnedest to try and figure it out. This could fit the mold, right? Like, and as long as we're not like so overly confident that we go out there and say, "All right, I'm empirically certain." And
no,
like,
yeah,
you know,
I can't
like,
say that at all. I don't think you can say that at all about any of this stuff.
No, I don't either. Even our like obvious interpretations, you kind of wonder, like, was that originally in the text? We don't even have the originals, right? So like, you can't even be certain, even if all textual traditions lead back to the earliest one we have, which is second century. What did the first century maybe say? You know, we don't know.
I'm curious to hear if anyone has any thoughts on I didn't just get this I actually got this from other commentaries about the Parthians being the 10, being the satraps. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Maybe have a different theory than that? Maybe it's something else?
I'm just a bit cautious on it only because the size of the Parthian Empire or the Persian Empire fluctuated a lot. Like during the time of Herodotus, when he describes the Persians, it had way more satrapies. But
that's why I use this map, because it illustrates the time from Caesar to Hadrian, which I think is a pretty good map to use. But yeah, I get what you're saying though. Very, very fluctual.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was just bringing up Peter Oak's article, which is behind a paywall. I might as well share my screen just briefly.
Sure.
So here, let me stretch it to let everybody see it better. Is that really visible?
Yeah, I can see it.
This paradoxically further supports a link between. So the clearest link, as Peter points out, Peter Oakes, the author here, is that it's Rome, right? Babylon. And he even goes further and says Rome, there appears to have been a broad Jewish literary tradition of representing Rome by using the name Babylon. Second Baruch, fourth Ezra are both generally viewed as reflecting on 70 CE by the vehicle of discussion of the capture of Jerusalem by Babylon. Gruen argues that Sibylline Oracle 5:434-46 also intends Rome in its reference to destruction of Babylon, although noting the oddity of the mention of Rome itself and another connection in the text. He goes in and actually shows fallen is Babylon the Great in Revelation, and brings up a few sources from the Sibylline oracles, if I'm not mistaken.
Nice.
That's Hebrew Bible. Maybe it was up at the top. What's this? That's Revelation, I think. This is John. I'm not sure who this is. All right, I'm just scrolling through this article here, but I know that he has Sibylline Oracle references, bloodshed in Babylon. Also in First Peter, it says that they're writing from Babylon. Now we know Babylon is no longer around.
Peter's using Rome as code for Babylon, or Babylon is code for Rome, I mean.
And like Christians will argue this is where Peter, was killed, right? Which this is also a forged letter in the name of Peter.
But it shows you what the Christian scribes are trying to relate. Peter's talking about Rome. Peter's in Rome. That's what they're trying to get at.
Oh, here is book 2 and passage with similarities, Revelation 17-18, with clear Christian elements, especially references to Christ and the martyr. Speaks of a time when the earth-shaking lightning giver will bring the zeal for idols and will shake the people of seven-hilled Rome. And this is the Greek phrase. I wish I knew Greek because he uses a lot of Greek in this article.
Oh, that's important because in Revelation, when it gets to the part, it's on the cover of my thumbnail. When it talks about the Greek apollyon and the Hebrew Abaddon, it also uses the term destroyer or the term shaker, which is used for what's his name? Why am I blanking on this? Oh, Poseidon is always referenced as the shaker, the world shaker. So, and that could be a destruction. They could be playing off that, because by the way, this is important too. Sibylists do this, and I think Revelation does this too. Is they sort of play on these names of these gods. For example, Hades and Thanatos are two gods from the Orphic hymns and in Homer. There's an Orphic hymn to Thanatos, there's an death. There's an Orphic hymn to Hades. There's an Orphic hymn to the sea, Thasala. There's an Orphic hymn to the god, the sea, Thasala. Well, in Revelation, it says the sea gave up its dead, Hades gave up its dead, and Thanatos death gave up its dead. Well, that's a weird language unless you're sort of playing off the idea of these gods being forces of the one. And this is monotheistic, obviously, but they're saying that these gods in Greek mythology are just forces, basically. You also have, The woman's clothed with Helios in Selene, and she is in Aranos, heaven. And back to this, talking about the destroyer, Apollyon, the world shaker, the destroyer. So there's a lot of that language in Greek. If you're reading this, if someone in the Greek-speaking world is reading this, let's say some Orphic guy living in Macedonia is reading this, that's how they're going to interpret it. They're going to be like, whoa, there's a lot of imagery happening here that I recognize.
Just a quick note as well, when you were showing the earlier Greek, I'm definitely not as good of a Greek scholar as Amon, your tutor, Neil, but I could at least read that much and confirm that it does say 8-hilled Rome. So you have Romes and then Hepta.
7-hill?
Right? Yes, 7-hill,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
It literally says that in the Greek there. And also, I was trying to remind myself, and I was able to triple check, in 4th Ezra, it mentions there, it also tries to symbolically show when it's going on, because earlier on it says we're writing this 30 years after the destruction of the temple, which of course would put you around the year 100 if you were taking that as the second temple being destroyed. And it talks about an eagle with 8 wings and 3 heads. It specifies those 8 wings, those 8 little wings are the 8 kings, and the 3 heads, then you realize, represent the Flavian dynasty. So it's another way of seeing this is how they do the number stuff and get to the same place for the same reasons to argue against the same Romans.
Wow.
Hey, my wife
good.
just called. I have to go. I wish
Sure.
this could go longer, guys. We were having such a good bromance, but
hell yeah.
I do have to go. It's my son's birthday. Thank you, Neil, for inviting me on. Man.
Definitely.
I will.
Tell him happy birthday.
Should we all sing?
Let's sing it. Happy birthday to you,
son.
Okay. Enough of that.
I don't even think he's watched.
Love y'all. I'm out.
All right, man.
All right.
Take care. Have a good night. I was just going to say really quickly, I looked up the root avad in Hebrew. So it seems like it's a loan from the where was I? Just had it. Dang it. I think it was in dang it, sorry, my brain's not working totally. But what it does have is, so Abaddon is destruction, ruin, or proper as Abaddon. Place of ruin, in Sheol for lost or ruined death, as development of earlier distinction of condition. But then you also have Avdan, which is destruction, and Aveda, which is a lost thing. So it almost seems like it's this concept of destruction, but not like total destruction, but almost like a forgetting.
I see what you're saying.
Like the concept of lost in the depths almost.
Yeah. Charlie Golden, thank you for the super chat. I think the 4 angels are the satraps of Orsono, Arabistan, Assuristan, and Maishon, right along the river. Interesting. I don't know how you got that, but it's interesting because, angel. The word angel, if you look at the etymology of it, it's a term that's used sometimes for like gods. Artemis of which location was it? There was a temple. Artemis of Syracuse. I just thought I couldn't think of it now. Artemis of Syracuse. I think it's Syracuse. Was called the angel. Artemis the angel, the Angelos. And it actually has its roots in augury. Birds of augury are called angelos, and they're basically prophecy. They're the message carriers of God. So for them to be satraps, I don't know. I think it's more or less the angels are messengers of God, and I don't think there's really much. I don't think there's much coding to be done there.
There's something really fascinating about that, though, because if they obviously there's already, not obviously, I already knew this this concept of the birds being used in augury to ascertain messages from the gods, but I wonder whether that intuition, I'd have to imagine that the concept of carrier birds would have had to come about after this belief. But it's just so interesting because birds are used to carry messages both from, the gods to man and from man to man.
Yeah. And to go back to the super chat, though, how would you argue that these 4 satraps are messengers of God somehow? I'm interested to hear if you have anything on that, Charlie. And thank you for this. That's interesting. It's interesting to think about that, though. Like, could these angels represent some sort of something else other than what we are given? Maybe it's possible, you know. And discovering ancient history with Pat Lowinger. All hail the Church of Myth Vision. That's awesome. That's fun. Thank you for that super chat, Pat. Appreciate that. Pat's good dude.
Charlie just responded.
Yeah. You say you want to respond?
No. Charlie just responded with context.
Oh, okay. Here we go. My previous super chat ran out. I was referencing the 4 conquering angels bound at the Euphrates. Ah, I see what you're saying. So you're going with I see what you're getting at. You're going with geographical on what the text is saying. This is where the location is, so you're following the location. I see that. I think that's possible. Yeah. You're going. What do you think about that, Aaron?
Considering it definitely mentions the Euphrates River drying up, that it gives us that general location. If it gives us those particular satrapies, I would have to think about that some more. But the reference to Parthia generally, and of course the long anonymity between Parthia and Rome, I'm pretty sure that's what the author's playing on.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Yeah, thank you for that, Charlie. That's a good point. Something to think about too.
Also, that I was just going to say, I think there's also, the possibility that even if it is the case that it might be in reference to it, or like it could fit, it's not to say that's necessarily what it originally means, or maybe like there, just because it fits, there's so many different, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah, it's just there's nothing you can say on this that we can say this is 100% fact, and I know what the author meant by this, and this is what it is. Like you can't do that. We're all throwing out theories on this, and we're just going what's the most likely. That's all you can really do. So
unless we can find the original author, and if this is the legendary Apostle John, he's still alive right now, so we can interrogate him and ask him a few difficult questions.
Yeah, we can. Now so I mentioned that, like, you get this weird language of Hades and Thanatos and the sea giving up their dead. That sounds very Orphic to me. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I already mentioned how a lot of these gods are being thrown out there in language of they're not actually talking about them as gods, but there's you can add up like 8 gods in here if you really just do the math and the Greek. Obviously, they're just using it as language, and obviously you can't get around talking about the sea without saying Thasala or like. So I get it. Like I'm not saying that they're talking about these gods, but when you say something specific like Thasala gave up its dead, the sea gave up its dead, Thanatos gave up his dead, death gave up its dead, Hades gave up its dead. Doesn't that sound like people or places or a noun? What do you guys think about that?
Well, definitely a noun. It's just that, does it also necessarily say that this is a theological or divinity of some sort? Because I'm pretty sure Revelation doesn't think the other gods are real, or at least not powerful, or they're just weird demons.
Right,
and
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but I'm also like, and you were even, alluding to this as well. If you wanted to refer to the sky, the only word at disposal to you in Greek would have been Aranos. In the same way, if you're speaking German, you say Himmel. If you speak English, you talk about the sky. It's almost impossible to not use those words and be understood. And yeah, the fact that also Uranos is also the name for technically not a god, but a titan, but that's a little semantic.
Sure.
I think you could maybe, at least depending on when it's written, maybe if it's like, so time might also be a factor, because like within Kabbalistic tradition, they texts specifically refer to the moon not as Yareach but as Levona, and the sun not as Shemesh or Shamash but as Hama, and they're used as descriptors, not as names, because the names are also used to refer to like pagan deities. And so I think you could maybe make the argument that if they really had an issue with it, like if they if they wanted to imply that they weren't that, they like, if it was a deliberate desire, then they could have used, for instance, like not an epithet, but almost like synonyms for like that which is above, instead of saying the heavens, or saying I don't know. Maybe this is a I feel like this is probably something that only really comes about within maybe like the early medieval period.
Sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying. What I'm trying to I think we covered like a lot of the juicy stuff. Is there anything else that anyone wants to throw out there that they? I mean, you got the 1,000-year reign. Here's what I wanted to. Now I remember. Now I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. The 3.5 weeks thing clearly comes from Daniel. Then this Revelation is not making this up. But I think it's interesting that when you look at the war, the Jewish war, it's a 7-year war, starting in 66, ending in 73. And in between 3.5 years between this, when the war starts, you get the fall of Jerusalem. 3.5 years after that, you get the fall of Masada. Is it possible that the author of Revelation is applying Daniel back onto this and saying, look, the dates match up. Look, because it's not exactly 3.5. It's not exactly 7. It might be like, 6 years and 10 months, or maybe even 7 years and a couple months. But I'm saying the Revelation author might be looking at these events and saying, Daniel was right. 3.5 weeks equals the time from Nero to the time of the fall of Jerusalem. And the other 3, like he might be trying to play with the math a little bit. Because I've always thought it's interesting how you have a war in heaven. Tacitus talks about this war in heaven. Josephus talks about this war in heaven. The Revelation obviously talks about the war in heaven. Michael going against the serpent. And it's happening at the same time as a war on earth, the war in Jerusalem, where the great city Jerusalem falls, where the temple is destroyed. This is a big deal. Do you think it's possible the author of this text is applying Daniel back onto this? What do you guys think? Because it's kind of interesting.
So, as we note, like the 3.5 years definitely coming from Daniel, and it's supposed to be in like the last week of years, and that midpoint to give it 3.5 is supposed to be pivoted around the end of temple sacrifices and the death of the Messiah. That's extracted from Daniel 9. I think 27 and 28 were the verses that highlight that. And it's almost certainly the case that Revelation is riffing on that. Does it perfectly line up with, of course, the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of Masada? I'm not 100% sure on that, not to mention there's a common practice in Josephus in particular, when he gives dates or like the number of years between things, he always tries to round up. So partial years will count as full years, things like that.
Exactly.
So the fact that we also see 3.5 years, it seems like it's trying to be more exact. So the fact it doesn't really exactly line up makes me think more it's being pulled in for its symbolic purpose, not its perfect alignment. Not to mention, if he really wanted to say this is a perfect alignment, then he has to explain why he's writing this in the year 90 and the end hasn't come, even though it should have happened 20 years earlier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's why I think I don't know. I think it's interesting how you have a war, and it's about 7 years, So, but like you said, I think there has to be a lot of rounding going on, and this also lets you know when it's written. I think it's pretty clear this thing is written way after. People argue that this is before the temple. I think that's going way too far. I think this is clearly talking about the events of the 60s and 70s.
I think that's the best way to make sense of why Rome is being called Babylon, the famous destroyer of the first temple.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's such a good point. That's such a clear point too. Babylon destroys the first temple in the, the 6th century BCE? 5th?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar. So now you have a redo, and it's history repeating itself according to, the Christians and people living in this time period. Now it's Babylon, but now it's coming from the other side. It's Rome. That's a good point. Like, that's very clear right there. That why is Rome called Babylon? Well, Babylon did the same thing. It's history repeating itself.
Yeah, and Babylon came from the earth, or from the land, and Rome came from the sea.
Yeah, is there a reference to that happening in the text of Revelation too, of a land and sea thing?
I think like the context of like the apocalyptic battle, or like the references to like the behemoth and the Leviathan, like how they're referenced as like chaos, like chaos and order. I haven't looked into this lately.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be interesting if there was something like that. But yeah, I think.
Well, I will note that in Revelation it does say that, like in the final conflagration, all the water will be evaporated away; it'll all be gone. And you see that also repeated in the Sibylline oracles, that when divine forces come down, it will destroy all the seas. So the fact that the beast comes from the sea, the woman is said to be on the waters. It even says, like, literally in the Greek, it's like epihydros. It's literally she's on the water, and that's one of the things that'll be absolutely destroyed, according to both Revelation and these other apocalyptic texts. So, yeah, that watery stuff, and that would be very different than Babylon. That just, it's definitely on land between a couple rivers, while Rome is a seafaring power.
Yeah, and I mentioned this reference from Juvenal about the 7 hills and how all this trade and people flocking near and far. Well, in Revelation 18, when it talks about the fall of Babylon, now this is obviously this is after all the events of what we discussed already. Now this person's really trying his hand at prophecy. They think Rome's going to fall. And they're talking about, alas, the great city, Babylon, mighty city, in 1 hour your judgment has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn for her, because there will be no more markets for their cargo of gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fine linen, and purple silk, scarlet cloth, fragrant wood of every kind, articles of ivory, articles of the most expensive wood, bronze, iron, and marble. The fruit you crave has left you, all luxury. So this is clearly referencing, like Juvenal was saying, a big city of trade, of markets, where people are coming to flock to. There's a lot to be said about that. And I don't know, Jerusalem, yeah, it was a pretty big city. It was a famous city from the time period, but I don't know if you would say that this is a famous city everyone's flocking to go to the markets for. I think it's not. I don't think it fits that as much as Rome does.
And especially because it mentions one of the things in the markets is scarlet cloth. And again, Jerusalem, not so much for that. Maybe Antioch, because Syrian color for that comes from there. But especially for the Romans, that's literally the color of the emperors, not the color of the Jewish priest or anything like that.
That's a good point. And the last thing I want to talk about is there's 2 beasts. Everyone talks about the beast is Nero. The beast is Nero. Then when they talk about Nero, which verse is this? Okay, this is from 13. It says, wisdom is needed here. One who understands can calculate the number of the beast. His number is 666. That's verse 18. I'm from chapter 13. But this is part of the second beast. Chapter 13 starts off the first beast. Then when you get to verse 11, then is it the second? Then I saw another beast. Nero's the second beast. The first beast, it gives you some clues on who it is. I'm going to throw this out at you and I hear what you guys think. It says that it was given authority to act for 42 months. Open its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling to all those who dwell in heaven. And then that's it. It's all it has, 42 months. The only emperor that matches up to being... So Caligula reigned for like a little bit over 42 months. I did the math. It's like 49 months. But I was like, it doesn't fit. So I was about to abandon the theory. I'm like, it doesn't fit. Well, why would they say 42 if it's not 42? But then I went and read the life of Caligula. He had 6 months on the run. He was driven out of Rome and had to run for 6 months before he was killed. He was not in power for those last 6 months. The author of Revelation might know that. Might be a stretch. But
I think what's more likely, though, if you take the number 42 divided by 12, you get 3.5. It's 3.5 weeks of years again.
So this is playing off that 3.5 week thing. Now, this could be a rounding thing again, though, right? Because think about this for a second. The reason why Caligula stands out to me is Caligula, besides Nero, is the worst. The way, if you read Philo, if you read the life of Philo, by the way, there's a biography about Philo. Caligula is going crazy on the Jews. He's setting up Dionysus statues. I think it was either Zeus or Dionysus. He wants to set it up in the temple. And they have to beg him not to do it. He's threatening to kill people, the embassies of the Jews. He's treating them like garbage. He's blaspheming Jehovah and saying, "Why are you worshiping Jehovah, not me?" This is in the text. So there was no, as far as I know, there was no emperor worse than Caligula before Nero. That's why I think Caligula fits this mold, because Domitian comes after Nero. So maybe the 3.5 weeks thing, I think you made a good point there. They might be rounding. They might be saying, because Caligula's reign is almost about 3.5 years. It's pretty darn close to that. So the author of Revelation doesn't really have, we don't know what he has in front of him as far as information. Does he have the exact times and all that? He might be rounding. He might be using this Daniel thing to apply it to Caligula. Is that possible, you think?
That will always be the problem, though, that we can tell whatever he's trying to do, he is forcing it to fit Ezekiel, Zechariah, Daniel, things like that. And so that's always going to be the fear of trying to force things to be exact on those numbers, because he obviously has much higher significance to the numbers in the holy text, not the numbers in reality, which has been true for prophetic predictions for the last 25 centuries.
That's such a good point, though, but that makes this make more sense. Whether it's Caligula or not, he's applying a number that he got from Daniel to it. So I think we're left with, ignore the 3.5 years and ignore the 42 months. Which of these emperors fit the mold? It's still, in my opinion, it's still Caligula. And it's close enough that he can apply. It's close. The times are close enough that you'd think someone like the author of Revelation is trying to make it fit. That's what it looks like. It looks like he's trying to make it fit. You can't say Claudius. How long did Claudius reign for? I don't know. But it's a little bit longer than that, you know. You can't throw Claudius on there because it doesn't fit. It would just be way off. And Claudius, as far as I know, wasn't, completely horrendous towards the Jews. As far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, I don't think he was. So that's my last thing. That was the last thing I wanted to throw out at you. The first beast. No one talked about the first beast. It's always the second beast.
That's because the first beast already happened, unless you take it as, oh, this is talking about something in the future, in which case you have to believe that the first beast is yet to happen, or that it's already happened and is going to happen again.
Sure. It was just confusing, but it's possible, I guess. Lev Polyakov, thank you for the super chat. Go and check out BreakTheRules.tv. Thank you for the super chat. Andrew Meyer confirmed to debate with Rabbi Singer on Break the Rules. His take is Jesus being a Kabbalist, and Andrew is the don't tease me bro guy, if you recall. So that'll be interesting. Now, I was told about this debate. I got to talk to Rabbi about it. I think he'll do it because he's all over this stuff. This person's trying to argue that the Old Testament is prophesizing Jesus. And on top of that, Jesus is a Kabbalist. So I'm not sure where he's going to go on how he's going to argue those points. It's going to be interesting to see, but I would love to see how Rabbi handles that because he's all over that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because I remember I've talked with some people about this. Apparently, there's a tradition that like Jesus stole like the divine name from a temple in a temple in Egypt or something. In which case, it'd be interesting if maybe there's like some context to the Elephantine temple. I'm not really sure, but yeah. But yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. And then he says, thank you, another super chat. Meant to write, don't tase me, bro. Stupid autocorrect. Remember that John Kerry event? That was Andrew being tased. Oh, that's the same person?
I didn't know that person had a life outside of being tased.
So you know who he's talking about?
I remember this scene because this was, when John Kerry was running for president back in... No.
04. Right?
Was it when he was running for president, or was it later? But I remember, I think he was running for president, so this would have been 2004.
Yeah.
And he was like a little bit, aggressive in trying to get his position out there. Security was coming in. Kerry was, trying to say, go ahead, let him speak, but security was being rougher with him. And the last thing you hear is saying, don't tase me, bro, while the security is taking him down.
Wow. Lev always finds random people that are known, like we know who this is, obviously. And he finds him and gets him on his channel. He always does that. He's very good at that. And he finds this particular person to debate Rabbi Tobias Singer out of all people. Like that's the internet for you, bro. That's some internet shit right there. I love it.
I mean, next I guess there has to be debate from all the people in that guy looking away from girlfriend to attractive woman meme. We got to get them in a debate together now.
Yeah,
because that's the internet.
For sure. I love that. I love this stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, so there were two things I wanted to bring up. One was in regards to what it was a while ago, but Aaron was talking about wait 1 second. What was it, the scarlet dye or whatever, how it was reserved for kings and like how it was associated with 1 second. Sorry, trying to get the noise off in the background.
That's all right.
But yeah, so one of the things that I was talking about before with Magdala, how they were known of the dyers, because they were because Magdala was on the Sea of Galilee, which is a lake, they didn't have access to the murex snails, which were used to produce, the murex dye, which was Tyrian purple or whatever, and apparently it was also used to produce the blue. It was just produced in processed in a different way, but with the red. I've made an argument that it was probably derived from the acacia trees that were planted at Magdala that were also said to be like sacred, and so people weren't supposed to cut them down, but inevitably people did. And anytime you have, you shall not cut it down, it's because there are people that were. But that acacia is used to produce a red dye. But one thing that's interesting is usually, this is kind of seen within like a bad context, especially within like Revelation, how it's used to describe like the Whore of Babylon. But here I've pulled up, this is like one of the most important liturgical songs, or it's from Proverbs, but it's sung as a song on Shabbat, and it's used to honor the woman of the household. Who can find the woman of valor? Far more than pearls is her worth. So there you have this association with pearls. The heart of her husband is secure in her, and he will not lack spoil. She returns him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax, though this word for flax might actually be hemp, but that's a story for another time. Wool and flax, and does all with the willing palms. She is like the ship of merchants. She brings her bread from afar. So there's an association with the sea and with merchandise. And she arises when it is yet night. So she's also associated with night, and prepares food for her household and the allotment of her young maidens. She thinks to obtain a field, and she possesses it. From the fruit, i.e. the work of her palms, she plants a vineyard. So there she's associated with, vineyards and like gardens. She girds her loins with might and strengthens her arms. When she takes counsel with herself, judging that her commerce is gainful, her candle is not extinguished at night. She sends her hands to the distaff, and her palms hold the spindle. So there she's associated with weaving. Her palm is spread open to the poor man, and she stretches forth her hand to the unfortunate one. She does not fear the snow, i.e. the cold, for those of her household, for all of her household is clothed in, here it says multicolored garments, but literally lavosh shanim. Scarlet crimson. And so that's the shani was the scarlet dye. So her entire household is garden. It says multicolored, but literally scarlet garments. She has made beautiful spreads for herself. She has clothed herself in... Okay, so no, before that was actually flax. But here, this word, shesh, is probably a reference to hemp. And in this case, hemp clothing. She has clothed herself in fine linen, which is hemp, and purple. Argamon is the purple dye. Her husband is distinguished from his friends by his fine clothing in the city gates, sitting among the elders of the lands. She makes linens and sells them, and she gives a sash to the merchant. Strength and glory are her vestments, and she has wrought unto her the day of her death, that it be crowned with a good name. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the Torah of loving kindness is on her tongue. She looks to the ways of those of her house to conduct themselves truthfully and modestly, and she does not eat the bread of indolence. And here's I think here's the end. Her children have risen and praised her, her husband and extolled her, saying, many women have done valorously, but you have risen above all of them. Favor is false and beauty vain. The God
Aaron, you said you got to go. Aaron, you said you got to go. All right,
Oh,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Catch
I
your
need to
plane,
run
man.
away.
Catch your plane. Catch your plane.
Yeah, when I come back, we can talk more Revelation because, in theory, I'll present my stuff, have some experts tell me I'm an idiot, come back, and I'll learn my lesson.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for having me. Bye, guys.
Yep. See ya.
But yeah, and then the last thing that I wanted to show, which I think is really interesting, and I only found this recently. I think I might have told you about this, but I don't know that I brought it up on the stream. Here, 1 second. Okay, yeah, here. So it parallels the revelation in Deuteronomy 33, where it's talking about like Yahweh coming down from Sinai. But then it also talks about him also coming out from Paran, or at least it implies that God, like in brackets, but it doesn't actually say that in the Hebrew. But here it says a prayer of the prophet Habakkuk in the mode of Shigionoth. Oh, that means Shigionoth. I think that might mean like while. Oh yeah, it means like rapid changes of rhythm. It's connected to the root for like crazy or like distorted. But anyway, so O Lord, I have learned of your renown. I am awed, O Lord, by your deeds. Renew them in these years. Okay, here's the relevant part. So and I'll read the Hebrew because this part's relevant. It doesn't say El or Elohim. Here it says Eloah, which is like the full like word for God. So Eloah miteman. Eloah comes out from Teman, which is from the right hand, or from the south, because that's viewing the east as, the rising of the sun, and so that's forward, and so to the right would be the south. From the south, God comes, and you could read this and or but Kadosh, the Holy One, Mehar Paran, the Holy One from Har Paran, from Mount Paran, Selah. So it's saying the Holy One comes from Mount Paran, and then Selah is like it's a poetic verse. Kisa Shamayim Hodu, his majesty covers the sky, his splendor fills the earth. So here, what's relevant is it's kind of paralleling this. You have Eloah and Kadosh, and Kadosh is like a cognate with Kudshu, which was one of the epithets of Asherah, interestingly enough. And the way you would probably read this, like if you look into the commentary, you're probably going to find references to the Shekhinah. So I'm guessing that's probably their way of, trying to commentate that. But if you look further, it gets really interesting because it goes into a very like revelatory type of paradigm. It is a brilliant light. And here it's Vinoga. And that's actually the same word that's used for Venus.
What is it now? Say it again.
Noga.
Noga, really?
Yeah. It should have it doesn't have the that it means Venus here, but it is one of the names for Venus.
Because I thought Hallel was that Venus planet. Morning, Hallel, the planet.
So with that, I mean it's an epithet for it. It's kind of saying like
I got you. Lucifer and Venus are the same planet, basically. That's what it's saying.
Yeah. So it's saying Noga, and Noga is like light, it is like a brilliant light that is that gives off karnaim, horns, meyado, from its side or from its hand, from every side. That's what it's saying. And therein his glory is enveloped. And here it's meaning of Hebrew uncertain. So see, here it says meaning of Hebrew, it's uncertain, but looking into it in context, Noga is Venus. And then so already you have the possibility of two gods, basically Yahweh and Asherah, possibly. But here you have Lefanav, Yelech, before him it goes Dever, which that's pestilence. It's also one of the plagues in Egypt. Before him marches pestilence, and going out from his side or his heels is Resheph, and Resheph is another disease god. When he stands, he makes the earth shake, kind of going back to that whole shaking the pillars of the earth paradigm. When he glances, he makes nations tremble. The age-old mountains are shattered, the primeval hills sink low. His are the ancient roots. And here it says, meaning of Hebrew uncertain. Oh, his ways are eternal. Yeah, so that's probably a better translation. As a scene of havoc, I behold. I think this is then it just goes more into commentary. But what's relevant here is this like paradigm, how it sets God is coming from Teman and the Holy One from Mount Paran. And so that's something that I think probably is referencing this, the wife of God, the mother of Israel, that at one point was loved but is later despised.
Yeah.
In Lamentations, it says, Jerusalem has greatly sinned, therefore she is become a mockery. All who admired her despise her, for they have seen her disgrace, and she can only sigh and shrink back.
Right. Interesting. That's crazy. There's a lot of that going on there. But yeah, so I'm good. That's it for me. Your channel, by the way, I have a link for your channel in the description. Let me pull it up right now so I can show everybody where to go subscribe to.
Awesome.
And
Thanks so much.
yeah, no problem, man.
Oh, also, I don't know if everyone's, but I wore a volcano shirt because, Revelation at Sinai.
Nice. Hold on one second. Let me just pull up your channels in here somewhere. Whoops, that's not it. Here we go. All right. So that being said, go and subscribe. Where'd it go? Chrome tab? There it is. Go and subscribe to Asherah's Orchard with Ariel Rozemberg. And yeah, you got a couple of videos out there already. Hit that subscribe.
Yeah, it's mainly just live streams, but eventually,
Yeah.
I'm going to just do a presentation on the 20-page paper on Asherah and the Tree of Life and the connections to cannabis that actually are what really got me interested in all of this in the first place. But also before we end off, I just want to bring up what Graham Pong said. There's significant occult meaning behind how the royal purple becomes holy blue when exposed to the light. And then
that's a good point. That's a good point because you have that. Their talit is that sacred color to the Jews.
So it's techelet.
Talit, yeah.
Talit is the garment, but techelet is the color that's used to often dye the fringes of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's that blue, and yeah, that's interesting because you have two different colors coming from one different. It's interesting how that works,
Yeah,
it's very rare colors from the ancient world that you couldn't just get naturally. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, I just realized something.
What?
So, what is purple the color of?
Purple? Royal.
Yeah. Okay, but like within the context of, Revelation.
The Scarlet Woman?
Or yeah, the whore of Babylon. And what is the blue, the redeemed purple, the color of?
The water?
I mean, yes, but like within the context, especially of like Christian motifs, you're going to see it used for Mother Mary, the Queen of Heaven.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But is that the same color blue? She always has that dark blue. Is it the same color?
So there's actually a type that's in, at least in the Renaissance, they used aquamarine, which is basically just crushed lapis lazuli, like pulverized lapis. And because it was so expensive, they used it specifically for like the centerpieces, which tended to be, in like Marian imagery. And so what's interesting about that is that she's the Queen of Heaven, but she's not the Queen of Heaven that people are supposed to, sacrifice to or worship. She's like understood as the Queen of Heaven because she gives birth to the Son of God.
Yeah, later Christians, well, especially Catholics. I'm not sure how the Protestants don't do this. And I don't even know, and I think the Orthodoxes do this, but they claim Mary was crowned as the Queen of Heaven after she gave birth to the Christ. She's not a pre-existing Queen of Heaven. She became the Queen of Heaven, sort of like Christ became the Son of God in that sense. But that becomes a Catholic thing. And the Protestants say, that's nowhere in the Bible. You can't say that. And that's where that whole entire beef comes from with the Mary thing. But that goes back to the early Christians. That's what they thought. They thought Mary was crowned as Queen of Heaven.
But yeah, there's this parallel of like, without the light, essentially in the darkness, it stays purple. And like, you have this idea that, like the rites of Kybele and, the Queen of Heaven, but like that we're that were viewed as bad, that they're typically done at night, whereas like reverence to Mary is
it makes you wonder. Makes you wonder if Author of Revelation was getting at with there's two different women. One of them's giving birth to the child. The other one's already a harlot. Some people say it's the same woman. Most people say it's not. Most people say it's two different women. But you definitely see the author trying to contrast the one to the other, for sure.
Wow,
definitely.
It's basically the Madonna horror complex applied to the Bible, if you think about it.
And plus, then you got to remember, in the ancient Orphic world, going back before Christianity, you had a queen of heaven and you had a queen of the underworld. You had two different queens. Persephone was the queen of the underworld. So I wonder, you got to wonder if that's at play. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But
and then there's even this idea that they can become flipped, that like heaven can become, the underworld, and the underworld can become heaven. Like, because, this idea that both are places where people return to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, we're going to do this again soon. A couple more days. I know you got Shabbat coming up, so I better get. I'm just kidding. But that'll be it for now. But we'll a couple of days from now we're gonna go live again, right? You'll be done.
I'm basically free whenever. I mean, except for when I'm busy. But I'll let you know. I don't have a whole lot going on right now.
Oh, by the way, that reminds me. If you guys have any topics, ideas, throw them out at us in the comments. After this video is uploaded, go to because the live chat will be gone. I won't be able to read through it. But leave a comment on the video after it's uploaded. Throw some ideas out there, because Ariel and I are always looking for cool ideas to look into. Maybe I'll find a scholar to bring on and talk about it, or maybe me, you, and Amo could tackle it or something. But I just like having these lives,
Oh yeah. Also, before I forget, because I know people love to have discussions in the comments, and like a lot of times after the videos is over, it's kind of like people are like feel the conversation's cut off. And if it's all right with you, would it be okay to promote this one Discord server that
sure.
Yeah, so it's here. I can send you the link to it to post in. Where is it? It's called Myth and Lore, and I was actually invited by Amon, and there's really cool people in it. And yeah, I mean, it's basically just open discussion. Just be respectful. Don't be a dick. It's not that difficult.
Throw it in the comments for the video so people can click on it.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, Nancy Divine, I just saw this. Usually, if I could see I go to super chats, they pop up right in front of my face. I can't miss them. But when you could ask questions. It's just hard to see them all because there's so many comments. Nancy Divine has a comment that I noticed. What about the purple antidote? Could it have something to do with that garment? What do you think about that? Because I think what she's talking about is something Amo was referring to. There was some sort of antidote that was purple, and people would like have it on their. You can see people like have purple on their list from taking the antidote. I don't know. Do you have any answer to that? I'm not really sure, but it's something interesting.
I mean, I think the easiest cop-out would be you could say that they're using wine as a base, because they used wine as a base for a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think that's a cop-out. It's possible there might be some sort of like,
wine was cleaner than water back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
That's why they would use wine for so many bases for different medicines and stuff.
But I do think maybe there is some sort of like active ingredient in the murex snails, maybe but that's the type of thing that you really need like modern researchers to look into.
Amon does all the he's the one translating Galen. He's reading all the medical text, so he might know about that. Maybe he's in the comments still, maybe he's not. He was supposed to be here, but he ditched me today, so not sure why, but But anyways, you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over you.